maybe there's major damage to the property. I want to know at the end of the day, if I have to foreclose, what does it look like? And so hopefully I'm protecting my investment by doing proper due diligence.
Interesting. This is very interesting. Okay. What should someone know before they go down this path?
Start in your backyard. This way you can drive by.
Angela, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience and let them know what you're all about?
Yeah, Leah, thank you so much for having me. My name is Angela Duncan, and I am with Empower Her Money. I grew up in Section 8 housing and welfare, didn't know anything about money. So I have been on this lifelong journey about learning about money, and I'm finally at a place in my life where I definitely want to give back and teach others.
That's awesome. So how did you learn all of this stuff? As someone who grew up on the lower rungs of the economic status as well, I had no idea, and I've educated myself some, but I'm definitely not any level of expert. So I'm quite curious, how did this kind of all turn around for you and actually turn into a business?
Yeah. So the first time I was working for a bank as a teller, I was going through college, and this lady walks in to make a deposit, and she was an older lady, and the check was for $40,000. And I have never seen a check that big. I asked her, "What do you do?" And she says, "Oh, honey, I'm a real estate agent." And I thought, I'm not sure what that is really, but I'm going to figure out what that is. So I got my real estate license in 2007. Imagine where the markets were in 2007. And I had this thing happen to me as a real estate agent where it really changed what I was doing when it came to real estate investing. So I would love to share that quick story with you.
Yes.
I was, obviously we were in the foreclosure market. I was in Florida, and I was viewing a property for an investor. And so that's when I fell upon tax liens, and I started learning about that because it's definitely a much safer way to participate in the real estate market.
Okay. Tax liens. What's the story? I've heard that term, but where's the opportunity with that? How does that all work?
Yeah. So this started in the 1800s, right? So if you own a piece of property, whether it's a house, condo, townhome, commercial property, you have to pay property taxes. Well, you're supposed to. And the government is waiting for you to pay that money to them because they have to pay for their budgets, right? Pave roads, teachers, all kinds of things that they pay with those property taxes. And when you don't pay them as your property owner, investors have a chance to come in and buy that tax lien certificate, which just means I'm giving the money to the government until which time that property owner can pay back the taxes that are due. So I'm loaning money directly to the government. They're going to pay me back, and we agree up front how much they're going to pay me in interest for that money I'm loaning to them. And in Florida, they pay up to 18% interest on tax liens.
Okay. Let me wrap my head around this. So someone's behind on their taxes. The normal way that happens is like they eventually can lose their property, right? Like if it goes through the process long enough, but you step in ahead of time, say, hey, government, let me pay this or lend you what's due. So then what happens if they don't pay? How does this work?
Depends on the state. In Florida, if you don't pay your property taxes for 2 years, then either the mortgage lender, if there's a note attached to it, or myself as the tax lien investor, we can start the foreclosure process. And I could essentially own that piece of property if you decide that you're not going to be able to pay back your property taxes.
Interesting. Okay. So if they have a mortgage on it, can you still get it?
Yeah, tax liens is in first position. So the government wants to get their money first. So if the mortgage broker does foreclose, they still have to pay the property taxes. Otherwise, they don't have a clear title. They cannot sell that property. The property taxes have to be paid. And so that lien is in first position over any mortgage, any HOA, any, overgrown grass, and the county puts a lien on it. The tax lien is in first position.
Okay, gotcha. So when it gets foreclosed on, whether you start the process or the bank starts the process, then that just means you're definitely going to get paid once that's foreclosed on and things happen.
Correct. And it depends on what your buy strategy is. For me,
Okay.
I'm looking for a homeowner that's likely going to pay their taxes back. I don't want to have to do foreclosure. It's kind of a longer process. It costs money. There's a lot of unknown factors. I want to be conservative. I want to know what I'm going to pay. So when I'm looking at which tax liens I'm buying, I have a very specific buy box so that I hope that that property owner is just going to pay their taxes back. Maybe they got sick, lost a job, they fell behind on their bills, but they don't want to lose their home. So they're going to pay their taxes back. I will get my money plus the interest rate that the government has guaranteed me. And then we're all happy.
So is there a risk of not getting paid back?
There is, absolutely.
Okay.
So the one thing that comes in before the tax lien is if they owe taxes to the IRS. So if they haven't paid their IRS taxes, that could come into play, but very rarely does that happen. And if you've done your searches correctly before you do your bidding on the tax liens, then you already know that ahead of time. But that's the biggest thing. Bankruptcy can delay you getting paid back. But again, the government always gets their money. So they're in first position.
Okay. And so let's say X amount of money is due to the government. You step in and pay that. Well, property taxes are due yearly. So the longer this goes out, do you have to continue to pay the taxes that are due, or how does that work?
Every year, if you don't pay your taxes, a new certificate can be generated. So our taxes here in Florida are due in April, and the tax lien auction opens May 1st, usually, and then it runs for the month of May. It is an online auction process in Florida. So you have time to do your due diligence. There's a lot of factors that you should be considering when you're doing this type of strategy. But then when the auction closes, you pay the government the money. They give you a certificate. You know exactly how much you've invested. You know exactly what your interest rate is going to be returned as. And once that property owner pays back their property taxes with the penalties, because they're going to have penalties, then the government just sends me my check. So to me, this is a great passive income. I do a lot of my research online, so I don't necessarily have to go see properties. I do drive by. So if I'm going to bid on a tax lien certificate, I want to drive by because I don't rely on Google. Google, you never know if the house burned down or, maybe there's major damage to the property. I want to know at the end of the day, if I have to foreclose, what does it look like? And so hopefully I'm protecting my investment by doing proper due diligence.
Interesting. This is very interesting. Okay. What should someone know before they go down this path?
Start in your backyard. This way you can drive by properties. What happens when the auction opens, the online auction, is you'll get what's called a parcel ID number, just like a social security number for a property. You can look it up and figure out where's that address and drive by, get to know the neighborhoods and figure out, is this a piece of property that you'd be okay owning if you had to foreclose, and kind of figure out what your buy box is going to look like. And it's great to partner with someone, but you can start with tax lien investing for $500. Property taxes relatively low depending on which property you're bidding on. So it's not a very high investment to start, but figure out what your due diligence process looks like and make sure you're doing that before you start bidding.
Okay. And then is it only single family homes? Is it potentially lots or other sorts of things as well?
Any piece of real estate. Could be a farm, could be agriculture, commercial, condo, townhome. All of those require property taxes. And so anything that has a property tax attached to it, then that's what you're going to be looking at.
Do you like one type of property more than the other?
I do. I like single family homes because if I have to own it, then I don't have to fight with an HOA. I don't want to deal with condos or townhomes that might be in an HOA. Commercial properties are also potentially good because you don't typically have rules around commercial properties like some of the residential properties, but it just depends on how much money you have to deploy.
Okay. So if you've got more than $500 that you can play with on this is a potential strategy that could work for you.
Yeah. And for me, I know exactly what I'm going to make. I don't have to ever worry about coming face to face with a homeless person. And I can do most of my research from the comfort of my home. And I work, the month of May is when I really put in that work to do my due diligence during that auction period. But the rest of the year, I don't have to do anything. And I kind of just wait for the government to pay me back the money I've lent to them.
Interesting. I think this is a very interesting concept. I've never heard of this before. I like it. So, okay. Very cool. Um, any tips or rules of thumb that you think people should be aware of?
Yeah, make sure you're doing your due diligence. You do want to know what other liens are out there because you will have to notify them if you do go through the foreclosure process. And it's important for you to understand if there's a mortgage attached. Do they live in the property? Are there HOAs? You can look up in Florida whether or not there's other violations like a green pool, a knocked down fence, trash, so many things that the county can put on the property as well. Now you're still in first position, but I still want to know what I'm going to have to go up against just in case we go through that foreclosure process and how, because a lot of that will determine, extra time if I do have to notify the county or a bank or other things. So just making sure that you have your proper due diligence before you start bidding and that you have the money in the bank, because once you close that bid and you're awarded it, the government wants their money right away.
I can imagine that. So what does that payment process look like? Is it a check or how does that happen?
Thank goodness everything is done online. So most of the counties go through the same carrier for their website and for their online portal. The list is there. You can download it. You can sort it and you make your bids. They want you to attach a bank account to it. They don't like credit cards because there's extra fees with that. So you'll do an ACH and you'll just attach your bank account to the online portal. Once the bidding closes and if you're awarded a certificate, they're going to ask for payment right away. And what's great about that too is you can set up the opposite. So if the property owner pays their taxes back, then the government wants to give you your money back. You can also do it through an ACH, just bank account as well.
Okay. Very cool. I love all this. This is wonderful. So I'm curious, as a coach and as somebody who's out there teaching all of this good stuff, how are you currently finding new clients these days?
Yeah, so this for me, I don't necessarily need new clients. What I have thought about, because one of my things is you always want to drive by the property. I live in Miami, so I'm not necessarily going to go up to like Daytona Beach or Tallahassee to bid. So perhaps I can think about expanding, partnering. Perhaps I can create a fund, and so I can bring other people's money in and teach them how to do it on their own as well. That's in a different area of Florida. I'm not as familiar with some of the other states. I tend to just focus on Florida because that's what I know. So future potential could be teaching other people in other states, but figuring out what their laws are as well.
Awesome. I love that. So if people want to check you out, where should they head?
Empowerhermoney.com is my website, but I do have a free resource for you as well. And Leah, I know I'm going to change it up on you, but we're talking about tax liens. So if you go to morewithangela.com/fire, then you will get a downloadable free guide on how to start your tax lien journey.
Awesome. And we will have the links to that in the show notes and description. Angela, this has been a very enlightening conversation. I really appreciate this.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you check Angela out. This is some pretty cool stuff. It might be the perfect investment strategy for you. And if you if you found this beneficial, if you know someone who's looking for different investment opportunities, go ahead, like, subscribe, share this with someone you know who could benefit. And if you're curious about how to be featured on one of our podcasts, head to the show notes and apply.
Thank you for listening to Empower Her Money podcast. I am grateful for you. Please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, like this podcast, share it, subscribe, and let's keep teaching others how to take control and be empowered with their finances.